Think about the person sitting closest to you right now. Maybe it is a friend, a partner, a family member. Maybe it is a stranger on a bus or a colleague in an office. You are near them. You share space with them. You might even know them very well, their habits, their preferences, their ways of thinking about the world. But you are separate. You have your own body, your own nervous system, your own private experience of being alive. When they feel cold, you might feel warm. When they want to sleep, you might want to stay awake. When they are hungry, you might not be. The boundary between you and them is absolute, physical, and never in question. Now imagine that boundary does not exist. Imagine that you and another person, a complete, separate, fully formed human mind with her own thoughts, her own feelings, her own opinions, her own dreams, share one body. Not metaphorically, literally. One torso, one pair of legs, one set of shared organs, two heads, two spines, two hearts, two minds. You control the right arm. She controls the left. You cannot move her arm. She cannot move yours. To walk, you must coordinate without thinking about it. To drive a car, to swim, to clap your hands, to type on a keyboard, every physical action that the world assumes a single person does alone requires the two of you to work together, seamlessly, without discussion, thousands of times a day. You cannot read her thoughts. She cannot read yours. You have different opinions. You like different foods. You have different handwriting. You are, in every meaningful sense, two distinct people. And you have lived this way every moment of every day since the morning of March 7th, 1990, the day you were born into a world that had no category for what you are. This is the life of Abigail and Brittany Hensel. Not a thought experiment, not a philosophical hypothetical, a real life lived by two real people with a depth and a richness and a humanity that no amount of medical description can fully capture. This is their story. Abigail Lorraine Hensel and Brittany Lee Hensel were born on March 7th, 1990, in Carver County, Minnesota, to Patty and Mike Hensel. Their parents did not know before the birth that they were expecting conjoined twins. The pregnancy had proceeded normally, and the technology available for prenatal imaging at the time did not reveal the full picture of what was coming. When Abby and Brittany were born, their arrival was a surprise and, initially, a profound shock. Patty Hensel, who has spoken with great openness about the early days in interviews over the years, has described the first hours after the birth as overwhelming. There was fear, uncertainty, and the immediate, pressing question of what the girls' medical situation meant for their survival and their future. The medical term for their condition is dysphalic parapagus, from the Greek for two heads and the Latin for side by side. It is one of the rarest forms of conjoined twinning. Most cases of dysphalic parapagus do not result in live birth. Of those that do, most do not survive infancy. The condition places extraordinary demands on a shared cardiovascular and respiratory system, and the statistical likelihood of reaching adulthood as dysphalic parapagus twins was, in 1990, very low. Abby and Brittany have always defied statistics. The early medical decisions their parents faced were agonizing. Doctors raised the possibility of separation surgery, the attempt to create two separate individuals from the conjoined body. This option was considered and rejected. The anatomy of their shared body made separation impossible without fatal consequences for at least one, and almost certainly both, of the twins. The shared structures, organs, blood supply, spinal connections, were too deeply integrated to be divided. Patty and Mike Hensel made the decision that their daughters would live as they were born. They would not be subjects of aggressive medical intervention aimed at normalization. They would be raised, as fully as possible, as the people they were, two girls who happened to share a body. This decision, made in the first days of their lives, shaped everything that followed. The Hensels are a close, warm, deeply grounded family from a small Minnesota community. Their approach to raising Abby and Brittany was characterized by a practical, unsentimental love, a determination to give their daughters the fullest possible life without making their condition the defining fact of that life. They were enrolled in school. They were expected to participate fully. They were raised with the same expectations, the same affection, and the same mix of support and challenge that any child in a loving family receives. What emerged over the years of childhood and adolescence and early adulthood was two distinct people, as different from each other in personality, preference, and temperament as any two sisters might be, and yet bound together in a physical intimacy that no other human beings in history have quite shared. To understand what Abby and Brittany's life is actually like, it helps to understand, in specific, concrete terms, the anatomy of their shared body, not as a medical exercise, but because the physical details are what make the human story comprehensible. They have two heads, each with a fully formed and functioning brain. They have two separate spinal cords which merge at the pelvis. They have two separate hearts housed in a shared chest cavity. They have three lungs, two on Abby's side and one on Brittany's, with a shared central lung. They have two stomachs which operate independently. They share a single liver, a single set of reproductive organs, and a single pelvis and lower body. From the navel downward, they are one body. From the shoulders upward, they are two completely separate people. The neurological division of their body, which twin controls which part, is one of the most fascinating aspects of their anatomy. Abby controls the right arm and the right side of the body. Brittany controls the left arm and the left side. Each controls the leg on her respective side, though coordination of walking is so deeply automatic that neither consciously thinks about which leg to move when. Neither can feel the other's arm or hand. If you touch Abby's right hand, Brittany feels nothing. If you touch Brittany's left hand, Abby feels nothing. Their sensory experience above a certain point in the shared body is completely separate. But they share sensation in the shared trunk and lower body in a complex way that neurologists have described as remarkable and still not fully understood. They do not, it appears, experience the shared lower body as belonging to either of them exclusively. It is simply theirs, in a way that does not map neatly onto the individualized body ownership that the rest of us take for granted. Walking looks completely natural when Abby and Brittany do it. This is extraordinary when you think about what it requires. Walking is a coordinated bilateral activity. The left and right sides of the body must work in rhythm, each adjusting constantly to what the other is doing. In a single person, this coordination is managed by one brain. In Abby and Brittany, it is managed by two separate brains that have developed, over a lifetime, an intuitive synchronization that operates below the level of conscious thought. They do not, when walking, discuss which leg to move next. They simply walk. The same is true of other complex coordinated activities. Swimming requires bilateral arm and leg coordination across two separate control systems. They swim. Clapping, which requires the right arm and the left arm to meet in a specific rhythm, requires Abby and Brittany to coordinate their independent motor control systems with split-second precision. They clap. They have learned over the course of their lives to type on a keyboard, each controlling the keys on her respective side. To play the piano, each playing her respective part. To drive a car, a process that required, when they were learning, a specific legal and practical negotiation about how to license two people operating one vehicle. They have two driving licenses. Both pass the test separately, demonstrating their respective control over the vehicle. The car's turn signals and other controls fall predominantly on one side or the other, negotiated between them as naturally as any other daily coordination. The efficiency and naturalness of their coordination is something that observers consistently remark on. It does not look like two people working together. It looks like one person moving through the world, except that above the shoulders there are two faces, two expressions, two voices, two distinct people having two distinct responses to everything that is happening. The medical facts of Abby and Brittany's shared body are extraordinary, but they are, in some ways, the less important part of their story. The more important part, the part that their documentary, their interviews, and the people who know them all return to, is the fact of their individuality. The fact that inside the shared body, there are two completely distinct human beings, with different personalities, different preferences, different strengths, different weaknesses, different dreams. Abigail is, by the accounts of those who know her and by her own self-description, the more assertive of the two. She is competitive, direct, and confident. She tends towards subjects that are concrete and structured, mathematics, science, the kind of clear answer thinking that appeals to a certain kind of mind. She is the one more likely to speak first in a new situation, to take the conversational lead, to state an opinion clearly and without hedging. Brittany is, by the same accounts, quieter and more reflective. She is warmer in her initial presentation, more attuned to the emotional texture of social situations, more inclined to consider the feelings of others before acting. She tends toward creative and expressive subjects. She is the one more likely to notice when someone in a group is uncomfortable, or to find the diplomatic path through a difficult conversation. These are not performances. They are not roles that have been assigned or negotiated. They are genuine personality traits that emerged organically over the course of their development, and that have been observed consistently by everyone who has spent time with them. They have different food preferences. Abby might enjoy something that Brittany finds unpleasant, a meaningful difference when you consider that they share a digestive system, and that what one of them eats, both of them are affected by. They have navigated this with the practical pragmatism that characterizes their approach to most of the challenges their shared life presents. They have different academic strengths. At Bethel University in Minnesota, where they completed their undergraduate education in education, they performed differently on different subjects, which created an interesting practical question about how to handle grading and academic assessment for two students who took every class together, sat in every lecture together, but had distinct academic identities. They have different handwriting. This is a small detail but a telling one. Handwriting reflects not just motor control, but the whole individual pattern of a person's relationship with language and expression. Abby's right-hand script is distinct from Brittany's left-hand script in ways that go beyond mere mirror image differences. They disagree, regularly apparently, about a wide range of things: where to go, what to do, what to watch, what to eat, what constitutes a reasonable response to a given situation. They have described the experience of disagreeing with someone with whom you share a body as requiring a specific kind of negotiation that most people never develop, a constant, ongoing management of difference within an absolute physical unity. They cannot give each other the silent treatment. They cannot storm out of the room. They cannot take space from each other in any of the ways that people in difficult relationships typically use to manage conflict. If they have a disagreement, they must resolve it, or coexist with the unresolved tension in the most intimate possible proximity. By all accounts, they are good at this. They have had a lifetime to develop the skills, but it is worth pausing to appreciate what those skills represent: a level of interpersonal negotiation and tolerance that most people never need to achieve, because most people have the option of physical separation when things get difficult. Abby and Brittany do not. Abby and Brittany grew up in the small town of New Germany, Minnesota, in a community that knew them and, by most accounts, came to treat them with the ordinary familiarity that small communities extend to their own. Their parents' decision to enroll them in mainstream school, rather than homeschooling or specialized education, was deliberate and consequential. It meant that from an early age, Abby and Brittany were navigating the full social complexity of a school environment. The friendships and rivalries, the inclusion and exclusion, the constant low-level social negotiation that childhood and adolescence require. This was not always easy. Children, as any parent knows, can be both remarkably adaptable and remarkably cruel. Abby and Brittany encountered both dimensions of this. There were children who stared, who asked intrusive questions, who made them feel like objects of curiosity rather than people. There were also children who simply got to know them and related to them as the specific individuals they were. Their parents navigated this with care, preparing their daughters for the reality that the world would sometimes treat them as remarkable rather than as ordinary, while also insisting on the ordinariness of their lives and their right to it. The Hensels made a decision early on about media and public attention that shaped how Abby and Brittany have managed their public profile throughout their lives. They agreed to a small number of carefully chosen media appearances, most notably a 1996 appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show when the girls were 6 years old, and a Life magazine feature, on the explicit understanding that these appearances would be done on their own terms, with their dignity intact, and with the goal of education rather than spectacle. This boundary between what they choose to share and what they keep private has remained central to how they engage with the world ever since. In 2012, they agreed to participate in a TLC documentary series, simply titled Abby and Brittany, which followed them through a significant transitional period. Their final weeks of university, their graduation, a trip to Europe with friends, and their early steps into professional life. The series was watched by millions of people around the world, and its reception was striking, not because of the medical curiosity it documented, but because of the sheer normalcy and warmth it revealed. What viewers found when they watched Abby and Brittany going to class, shopping for clothes, navigating airports, sitting with friends, and talking about their plans for the future, was not the freakish spectacle they might have expected. They found two young women who were funny, grounded, smart, occasionally bickering, occasionally laughing, and thoroughly, recognizably human. The series was praised for its respectful and humanizing portrayal. It did not sensationalize. It did not dwell on medical details. It simply followed two people living their lives and trusted the audience to find that interesting, which they did. The question of how children respond to Abby and Brittany is one that came up frequently as they moved toward their chosen career as primary school teachers. Children, perhaps more than adults, have the capacity to encounter the unfamiliar, and once the initial surprise has passed, simply accept it. Teachers who have observed Abby and Brittany in classroom settings have described children adapting quickly, treating them as their teachers, and relating to each of them as the distinct person she is. This is perhaps the most hopeful detail in their story. The capacity for acceptance that we sometimes lose as adults, the ability to encounter difference and move through initial strangeness to genuine recognition of a person, is something children retain. And Abby and Brittany, in choosing to work with children, have placed themselves in an environment where that capacity is most available. There are questions that people ask about Abby and Brittany, some openly, some only in private, that deserve honest engagement. Because part of what makes their story important is exactly the discomfort and complexity that these questions reveal about how we think about identity, privacy, and the boundaries of the self. The first question is about privacy. Two people sharing one body means that the concept of physical privacy, which most of us take entirely for granted, operates differently for them. Medical examinations, personal hygiene, physical intimacy, all of the aspects of embodied life that are typically private are, for Abby and Brittany, necessarily shared between them. They have addressed this in interviews with characteristic practicality and a notable lack of distress. They have developed, over lifetime, a way of managing the shared body that respects each person's individuality while acknowledging the shared physical reality. They have spoken about having learned to give each other a form of psychological privacy, a practice not attending to each other's experience, that allows them to function as individuals within their shared physical situation. This is not a perfect solution to a philosophical problem. It is a practical accommodation to an unprecedented reality, developed by two people who have had their entire lives to work on it. The second question is about relationships. Can each of them have a separate relationship? Can either of them marry? What would intimacy look like, given the constraints and the necessarily shared nature of their physical existence? These are questions that Abby and Brittany have consistently and explicitly declined to discuss publicly, and they are right to do so. The details of their intimate lives are theirs, not the public's, not science's, not a YouTube documentary's. The fact that their situation raises questions does not mean they are obligated to answer them. What they have said, in general terms, is that they hope to have full lives, and that full lives, for them as for anyone else, include the possibility of love and partnership and family. In 2023, it became publicly known that Brittany had married a man named Josh Bowling in a private ceremony that the family had kept quiet for some time. The news was received with a range of responses, from celebration and warmth to intrusive speculation about the practical and legal dimensions of the marriage. Abby and Brittany have not commented publicly on the specifics. This is their right. The marriage is Brittany's personal life, and to whatever extent it is also Abby's, the terms of that are between the two of them and not something they owe the world an explanation of. What the marriage reveals, simply and powerfully, is that the life Abby and Brittany are building is a full one. One that includes love, commitment, and the ongoing construction of a future, on their own terms, in their own way, with the privacy that every human being deserves. The third question is the philosophical one. Are they one person or two? Legally, they are two. They have separate birth certificates, separate legal identities, separate professional certifications. The law treats them as two individuals who happen to share a body. Neurologically, they are unambiguously two. Two separate brains, two separate streams of consciousness, two separate experiences of being alive. There is no shared thought, no telepathy, no merging of inner experience. What Abby thinks, Brittany does not automatically know. What Brittany feels, Abby does not automatically share. And yet they share a body in a way that makes the word separate seem inadequate. They cannot be in different places at the same time. They cannot act independently in the physical world. Everything they do in the world, they do together, whether they want to or not. The philosopher Derek Parfit spent much of his career thinking about personal identity, about what makes a person the same person over time, about the relationship between the body and the self, about how we should think about identity in cases that resist ordinary categorization. He would have found Abby and Brittany's situation one of the most interesting he could have encountered. Because they resist categorization. They are two, and they are one, and the categories we have for talking about persons were built for situations that look nothing like theirs. Let us come back from the philosophical questions to the concrete, specific, extraordinary life that Abby and Brittany have built. They graduated from Bethel University in 2012 with degrees in education. They completed their student teaching placements. They applied for teaching positions. They were hired. The logistics of their employment were, predictably, a subject of discussion and of a certain amount of unfairness. Two people doing one job raised immediate questions about compensation. Are they paid as one teacher or two? The answer, which they have addressed with their characteristic directness, is that they are paid as one teacher. They have spoken about this with a pragmatism that does not entirely conceal the complexity of the situation, acknowledging that the financial reality of being two people who can only occupy one professional role is one of the many asymmetries their situation creates. What they do in that classroom is what they train to do: teach. By the accounts of colleagues, parents, and the children they work with, they are good at it. The classroom presence of two distinct personalities, two voices, two perspectives, operating through one physical form, is something that children adapt to with remarkable speed. Within days or weeks, most children simply know which twin is addressing them and relate accordingly. This is, in some ways, the most quietly radical thing about Abby and Brittany's professional life. They are not working in a protected or specially accommodated environment. They are doing a demanding, socially complex, genuinely difficult job in a mainstream setting, and they are doing it well. They travel. The 2012 documentary showed them navigating European airports and cities with the efficient pragmatism that characterizes their approach to all logistical challenges. Travel, which for most people involves a certain amount of friction and adjustment, involves additional layers of complexity for them. Document checks, security procedures, the ongoing management of a world designed for single bodies. They handle it. They have a community of friends, people who know them and relate to each of them as the distinct person she is. These friendships are, by the accounts that their documentary and interviews have provided, genuine and warm, not the carefully managed relationships of people who are relating to a curiosity, but the ordinary friendships of people who have found each other interesting and congenial. They have family. Their parents, their siblings, the extended network of people who have known them since childhood and who see them, first and always, as Abby and Brittany, not as a medical case, not as a phenomenon, but as members of a family. And they have each other. This is the relationship that sits at the center of everything, the one that has no analog in any other human experience. The relationship between Abby and Brittany is not quite sibling love, not quite friendship, not quite partnership. It is something that exists only between them in the specific and unprecedented circumstances of their shared life. They bicker as sisters do. They laugh together at things that only they find funny, in the way that people who share a context always do. They have developed, over 34 years of shared life, a knowledge of each other that goes beyond anything most people develop with anyone. They know each other's rhythms, preferences, reactions, and tendencies with an intimacy that no amount of time spent together could replicate in two people with separate bodies. What they have built, together and individually, is a life. A real, full, specific, ongoing life, with work and friendship and love and disagreement and growth, and all the ordinary texture of human existence. A life that happens to be organized around a physical reality that no other human beings share. Abby and Brittany Hensel's story raises questions that go far beyond their individual lives. It asks something fundamental about how we think about persons, about what makes a human being, about where one person ends and another begins, about the relationship between the body and the self. In the Phineas Gage story, we asked, if the personality changes completely, does the person remain the same? The answer the case suggested was uncomfortable, that the self is more physically contingent, more dependent on specific brain tissue than we like to think. Abby and Brittany's story asks the same question from the opposite direction. If two complete, distinct, fully formed selves share one body, one set of physical resources, one location in space, one presence in the world, are they one person or two? The answer: they live every day is two. Unambiguously, irreducibly two. Despite everything they share, the body, the location, the social presence, the legal complications, they are two people. Their inner lives are separate. Their personalities are distinct. Their experiences of being alive, while necessarily intertwined, are not merged. This tells us something important about what the self is. It tells us that the self is not the body, or not only the body. That two complete selves can exist within one physical form, each fully real, each fully individual, each fully deserving of recognition as a separate person. It also tells us something about the relationship between independence and individuality. We tend to assume that being a fully developed individual requires a certain kind of independence, the ability to act alone, to be alone, to make unilateral decisions. Abby and Brittany challenge this assumption directly. They cannot act alone. They cannot be alone. They cannot make any physical decision without, in some sense, it affecting the other. And yet they are individuals, fully formed, fully distinct, fully real individuals. Their individuality does not depend on their independence. It exists within and despite their radical interdependence. There is something in this that extends beyond their specific situation, because none of us, when we think about it carefully, is as independent as we like to believe. We are embedded in relationships, in communities, in physical and social environments that shape who we are and constrain what we can do. We are, all of us, more interdependent than the mythology of individual autonomy acknowledges. Abby and Brittany make this visible in an extreme and literal way. They cannot pretend to be separate from each other. They cannot maintain the fiction of pure individual autonomy that the rest of us sustain with considerable effort. Their interdependence is absolute and obvious. And they are, by all accounts, doing fine. Better than fine. They are living full, meaningful, productive lives in full awareness of their interdependence, having made peace with it not as a limitation, but as simply the condition of their existence. There is something genuinely instructive about that, not in a sentimental, inspiration-porn way, not the reduction of their lives to a lesson for the able-bodied, but in a genuine, philosophical way. They have solved a problem that most of us never have to confront directly: how to be fully yourself within a life you cannot fully control. The answer: they live, is not a technique or a philosophy. It is a practice, daily, ongoing, requiring constant negotiation and adjustment and good humor and patience. But it is working. On March 7, 1990, in Carver County, Minnesota, two people were born. They came into the world together, in a way that no two people had quite come into the world before. They have moved through that world together ever since, through childhood and school and university and work and friendship and love, through all the ordinary and extraordinary experiences that make up a human life. They are 34 years old now. They are teachers. They are daughters and sisters and friends. Brittany is a wife. They are members of a community, contributors to the lives of the children they teach, participants in the ongoing human project of building a life that means something. They have been objects of curiosity for as long as they can remember, because the world they were born into had no category for them, and people reach for curiosity when categories fail. They have handled this with a grace that speaks to the quality of the people they are and the family that raised them. They have also consistently and clearly asked for something simple: to be seen as people, not as a medical phenomenon, not as a philosophical puzzle, not as an inspiration or a tragedy or a curiosity, as people, two specific, distinct, irreplaceable people who happen to share a body and who are getting on with the business of living. They deserve that. They have always deserved that. And what their story gives us, if we receive it in the spirit in which they have chosen to share it, is not a lesson about disability or difference or the limits of the body. It is something simpler and more profound. It is evidence that the human capacity for individuality, for personality, for the construction of a self, is more robust, more resilient, and more fundamentally irreducible than we might have imagined. That it can exist in the most constrained and unprecedented circumstances. That it cannot be shared away, or merged away, or physically limited away. Two minds, one body, two people fully and completely and irreducibly themselves. Abby and Brittany, both of them real, both of them here, both of them living, right now, the life they have built together and separately, and in the space between those words that language has not quite developed the vocabulary for yet. We wish them well, both of them. Thank you for watching. Abby and Brittany Hensel's story is one that I find more moving and more philosophically rich the more carefully I think about it. If this video gave you something to think about, share it with someone. Subscribe for the next story. And leave a comment what part of their story stayed with you. The medical reality, the philosophical questions, the ordinary life they have built. Or simply the fact of them, two people, fully themselves, finding a way. I want to know.